A silent moment of value. It arrives in a silent moment when this question emerges. It doesn't come as a speech. It comes when you realize you're doing more than you should, giving more than you want to, swallowing more than you can bear. And still, you keep being treated as if you were replaceable. You look around and feel that something is out of place. It's not exactly anger. It's a mixture of exhaustion, frustration, and an uncomfortable feeling of invisibility, as if your presence were useful, but never truly considered. As if you were always available, but never really chosen. At some point, this question starts to hurt more than it should. Why don't people give me the value I deserve? And the most unsettling part is that very often you can't clearly point to a culprit. There was no big betrayal. There was no dramatic scene.
Just a slow repetition of small gestures, ignored messages, unrecognized efforts, invitations that never arrive, decisions made without consulting you. And little by little, something inside you begins to withdraw, not visibly, but deeply. Nietzsche said that one of the greatest dangers to a human being is not pain, but the weakening of one's own inner strength. Not the loud, arrogant kind of strength, but the quiet strength of someone who knows who they are and doesn't need to beg for a place. When you begin to accept being treated as optional, something very subtle happens. You don't just lose others' respect, you begin to lose respect for yourself, and this is almost never noticed at first. Think of a simple scene. Someone who is always available, who always helps, who always understands, who always gives in. At first, this looks like virtue, and in many ways it is. But there is an invisible line between generosity and self-abandonment.
When that line is crossed, the world learns a dangerous lesson. It learns that you will always be there, no matter the cost. And human beings, when they don't encounter boundaries, rarely learn to recognize value. Not out of pure malice, but by nature. Machiavelli observed this with almost cruel realism. People tend to respect more what carries weight, consequence, boundaries, not what is offered without resistance. Here arises an important discomfort, because perhaps the question is not only, why don't they value me? Perhaps the harder question is, at what moment did I start treating myself as someone who doesn't need to be taken seriously? This is not an accusation, it's an invitation to clarity. Jung would say there is a part of our shadow that prefers to be accepted rather than to be true. And when that part takes over, we begin to negotiate our own dignity in exchange for belonging. Many people learn early that being loved means being useful.
That being accepted means not causing trouble. That being chosen means not creating conflict. And so they build an identity based on that. The problem solver, the understanding one, the one who endures. But over time, this takes a toll, because the world starts relating to this functional version of you, not to your full truth. And you begin to feel that something is wrong, but you don't know exactly what. Nietzsche would call this a subtle form of personal nihilism, not the abstract philosophical kind, but the kind in which life itself gradually loses weight, in which you live more to adjust than to affirm yourself, in which your will is gradually replaced by the habit of pleasing, avoiding friction, not bothering anyone. And slowly the question changes tone. It's no longer just, why don't they value me? It starts becoming, do I even still know what I'm worth? There is a profound difference between being humble and being invisible.
Humility is knowing who you are without needing to inflate yourself. Invisibility is forgetting who you are to avoid the risk of rejection. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we don't control how others see us, but we do control the posture with which we occupy our place in the world. And that posture isn't made of beautiful words. It's made of boundaries, choices, small no's that protect large yeses.
Notice how often the devaluation begins in almost imperceptible details. You accept something that bothers you so you don't seem difficult. You swallow frustration so you don't create tension. You make yourself a little smaller to fit better into someone else's expectations. None of it seems serious in isolation, but added together, these gestures build an inner narrative that your presence is negotiable, that your discomfort matters less, that your truth can wait. Jung would say that whatever you don't consciously affirm, the world decides for you.
And it almost always decides in a way that makes you smaller. Not because of conspiracy, but because of human dynamics. People organize themselves around visible forces. And force here is not aggression, it's clarity, it's coherence. It's knowing where you end and where the other begins. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power not as the desire to dominate others, but as the capacity to affirm oneself in one's own existence. To say, even in silence, I am here, and that matters. When this will is repressed for too long, it doesn't disappear. It turns into resentment, exhaustion, into that question that corrodes from within. Why doesn't anyone see me for real? Perhaps because at some level, you learned not to show yourself fully, to show only the useful part, only the easy part, only the part that doesn't create friction. And the world, as always, responded in kind, treating you as something useful, easy, replaceable. It hurts to realize this, but it is also liberating.
Because it means there is something that can change, not in others first, in you. Plato spoke of the shadows in the cave. Sometimes the image the world has of us is just a shadow of what we truly are. But there comes a point when continuing to live as a shadow becomes exhausting. And the way out of the cave is not a cinematic heroic gesture. It's a sequence of small, uncomfortable choices. Saying what you really think, even at the risk of displeasing. Setting boundaries, even when afraid of loss. Stopping over-explaining. Stopping justifying your existence. This doesn't transform the world overnight, but it transforms the way you occupy your place in it. And curiously, when this changes, the relationships around you also begin to reorganize. Some people drift away. Others draw closer in a more authentic way. And for the first time in a long while, you start to feel that you're no longer negotiating your own dignity just to have a presence.
There is a kind of strength that makes no noise. It's the strength of someone who decides not to abandon themselves anymore, who accepts that not everyone will like them, not everyone will stay, not everyone will understand. Nietzsche would call this an act of value creation. You stop waiting for the world to tell you how much you're worth, and begin living in a way that makes the question less necessary. Perhaps the simplest and most difficult practice is this. Today, in silence, observe where you have been diminishing yourself to fit, where you have accepted less than you deserve to avoid being alone, where you have silenced what matters to avoid losing space. Not to judge yourself, but to see yourself. Because every real change begins when we stop running from ourselves. And perhaps, little by little, the question changes. Instead of, why don't they give me the value I deserve, it transforms into something calmer and stronger. How can I live in a way that honestly reflects the value I know I have? And when that question changes, many things around it begin to change too. Not by magic, by coherence. But there is an even more delicate part to this story, and almost no one likes to look at it. Sometimes the problem isn't only that others don't value you. Sometimes there is, deep inside you, a profound fear of discovering what happens if you stop adapting. Fear of losing relationships, fear of being alone, fear of realizing that some presences only existed because you kept making yourself smaller to fit into them. Think about this honestly. How many times have you stayed in a place, in a relationship, in a role, not because it was good for you, but because the alternative seemed worse? Because the idea of breaking, changing,
repositioning yourself felt too frightening. Human beings, deep down, don't just flee from pain. They flee from the emptiness that might come after the pain. And very often, they accept a smaller life to avoid facing that emptiness. Nietzsche said we prefer a bad certainty to a true uncertainty, because uncertainty demands creation, and creation demands courage. When you start asking why you aren't valued, perhaps without realizing it, you are brushing against an even more dangerous question. Who would I be if I stopped living to be accepted? Many people never find out, not because they can't, but because they spend their whole lives too busy trying to keep things as they are, keeping the image, keeping the role, keeping the place that hurts but is familiar. There is a kind of silent exhaustion in this, an exhaustion that doesn't come from too much physical effort, but from too much emotional adaptation. And here, it's worth looking at a common scene. Someone who comes home at the end of the day, sits on the couch, picks up the phone, and feels a strange emptiness. Nothing serious happened. The day was normal. But inside there is a feeling of living a life that isn't quite theirs, of always responding to other people's expectations, and less to their own. This kind of exhaustion isn't solved with rest, because it's not the body that is worn out. It's the identity. Jung would say that when we live too long disconnected from who we really are, the unconscious starts sending the bill. And it sends it in strange ways. Unexplainable discouragement, constant irritation, the feeling of being out of place in one's own life. Sometimes even physical symptoms, not because the body is broken, but because the soul is being ignored. And then the question, why don't they value me, takes on another contour. Perhaps it isn't only about others.
Perhaps it's about a part of you that is asking, for the first time, to be taken seriously. Notice how often the people who complain most about not being valued are the same ones who have difficulty saying no. Not because they are weak, but because at some point in life they learned that love came together with approval, that belonging came together with usefulness, that being chosen came together with molding oneself. This may have started in childhood, adolescence, or in old relationships that left deep marks. Nietzsche saw this as a subtle form of herd morality, living more to fit in than to affirm oneself. Not in the sense of becoming selfish or arrogant, but in the sense of never truly placing oneself in the world, never risking existing in one's own shape. And there is something almost cruel in this. The more you erase yourself to fit, the less the world sees you. Not only because the world is unfair, but because you yourself become more and more transparent.
Not in the sense of lightness, but in the sense of invisibility. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that dignity does not depend on applause. It depends on inner alignment, on living in a way that makes sense to you, even when no one is watching. And this is very different from trying to be valued. It is choosing to be whole. Perhaps the turning point is not demanding more from others. Perhaps it is stopping negotiating so much with yourself, stopping over-explaining, stopping asking permission to exist, stopping offering yourself in pieces, hoping that someone, finally, will recognize the whole. Plato would say there is a difference between living in the world of shadows and walking toward what is more real. Sometimes the shadow is not only the other's lie about you, it is the lie you learn to tell yourself to keep belonging. And that hurts to face, because facing it means accepting that some losses are inevitable. That some relationships only survive while you remain smaller than you are. That some dynamics only work while you keep silent. But it also means making room for something rare, more authentic relationships, cleaner choices, a life that begins to carry its own weight. Nietzsche would call this an act of tragic maturity, not in the sense of pessimism,
but in the sense of accepting that every true affirmation of life demands a price, and that price is often the loss of comfortable illusions. Perhaps, in the end, the value you seek in others begins to be born when you stop treating yourself as someone who can be postponed, when you stop living as if your life were a draft, when you begin, even with fear, to exist with more wholeness. And this is not proven with speeches. It is proven in small decisions, in small boundaries, in small refusals, in small acts of honesty with yourself. That is how your presence changes weight in the world.
Not because you demand more, but because you begin to sustain more of who you are. In the end, perhaps the most honest question is not, why don't they value me? Perhaps it is, in which part of my life am I still treating myself as someone who can be placed in the background? This question doesn't accuse, but it awakens. And perhaps that is what begins to change everything.